I just got my latest blood work, and in today's video I'm going to share the results with you. I got a really fun cholesterol test called an NMR Lipoprofile. Part of that is a standard lipid panel. I also got some more iron related tests and some blood sugar markers, along with some vitamins and minerals, a couple of inflammation markers, plus a fun new test that I've never taken before that I think is going to be of interest to a lot of you out there. I'm Jenny. I've been doing a carnivore diet experiment for the past 18 months, and I've been tracking my progress through weight, measurements, DEXA scans, continuous glucose monitoring, blood work, and arterial scans, and I've been sharing all of that information with you here on YouTube. I'm very passionate about people knowing their numbers and taking personal responsibility for their health. So I share this blood work data with you in the hopes that you'll learn a little something and that you will feel empowered to maybe get some of this blood work done on your own and also feel confident reading the results. I order all of my blood work online at ownyourlabs.com. I'm testing my blood probably once a month to share with you here on YouTube. So I was getting kind of tired of asking my doctor to run all these tests for me. So I decided I'm just gonna order this stuff online for myself. You're able to order blood work online in most states in the United States. So I'm going to put a link to Own Your Labs in the description. I also have a 10% off coupon code for you. This is not an affiliate code. I don't get anything for this, but I really believe in the work that Own Your Labs is doing. I love that this is available for me, and I wanted to make sure you were getting a discount when you order your own blood work, so be sure to use that coupon code. Here's the process. You go to ownyourlabs.com and you go into their product catalog, and then you just click on things and add it to your cart, just like you would on Amazon. Then you purchase everything online with your credit or debit card, and within one business day, you are going to get an email from Own Your Labs with the blood work order. You're going to print out that order and bring it to your local Labcorp facility. You can make an appointment online. That's what I like to do, so I don't have to wait to get my blood drawn, or you can just walk in. You get your blood drawn. There's no additional cost at Labcorp. That cost is baked into the price that you've already paid on Own Your Labs. So you get your blood drawn, and within a few days, you get all of your results through the Labcorp online portal. It really couldn't be any easier. Let's move into my blood results. We're going to start with that NMR Lipoprofile, which is an advanced lipid particle size test. I'll just go down the line and show you the important numbers, and then I'll talk about what I'm looking for in a cholesterol test, including the healthy ranges that I'm aiming for. So first off, what is an NMR Lipoprofile? Well, it's an advanced lipid particle size test. So what it's measuring is the size and buoyancy of your lipoproteins. It will also give you a standard lipid panel. So we're going to be able to see total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, HDL cholesterol, and triglycerides. Now, any cholesterol test is just going to be a window into the state of your metabolic health. I don't think any of these blood markers can be cherry picked to just be like, oh, this is the most important marker that's going to determine your metabolic health. I just don't think that that is possible from any kind of cholesterol test. We're going to talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. So let's go through all my numbers first. When you get the printout, you're going to get something like this that just has all the numbers like this, but you're also going to get some cool charts that look like this and this. So I'm going to pop these up on the screen so that you can see them better. We're going to start with LDLP. That is your LDL particle number. And for me, I was at 2,382. Next up, we'll go into the standard lipid panel portion of this test. My LDL cholesterol, 254, HDL cholesterol, 97, triglycerides, 61, and total cholesterol, 358. The next thing I look at when I'm looking at this report is the small LDLP, and that was less than 90. And then I'm looking at the LDL size, and it was 22.1. I also want to see if I have an A pattern or a B pattern, and I have an A pattern. And that's pretty much all I am looking at when I look at this report. Everything else is kind of not that big of a deal. There is an LPIR score down at the bottom that will tell you your insulin resistance based on your cholesterol numbers, and mine is saying I'm very insulin sensitive. The cost for this NMR Lipoprofile test is $69 on Own Your Labs. If you just want to get a standard lipid panel, that's about $8.75. I really don't think you need to be getting this extensive cholesterol testing every single time you're doing blood work. I think one time, maybe once a year, is sufficient to get you the information that you need. But I do think it's valuable to do this test at least once. Here are the values that I'm looking for when I'm reading this test for myself. So for LDL particle number, that's going to be all over the place. And I personally follow a carnivore diet. So for me, I personally see that number is pretty high most of the time. Honestly, I don't pay much attention to that number. I'm more concerned about my triglycerides being low, my HDL being high, that my particles in general are large and buoyant, and that I have a small number of the small dense LDL particles. I also want to have an A pattern. So if we're looking at my data, we will see, let's look at the standard lipid panel first. My triglycerides are excellent, 61. That's amazing. I'm aiming for 100 or less. My HDL cholesterol, 97. Holy smokes, that's the highest it's ever been for me. I'm typically in the high 70s on a carnivore diet, and it has really jumped up. For HDL cholesterol, you want that to be above 40 for men and above 50 for women. LDL cholesterol, I don't really have a range. I see that number all over the place. It can be lowered very quickly. It can be raised very quickly. And I don't think LDL cholesterol is bad. We'll talk about that more here in a little bit. So honestly, not super concerned about that number or the total cholesterol. When I'm looking at a standard lipid panel, all I'm really looking at is HDL cholesterol and my triglycerides, and both of those are really, really good. Before we move on to the rest of the NMR lipoprofile, I want to talk a little bit about the lean mass hyperresponder phenomenon. So my LDL cholesterol is very high, but my HDL cholesterol is also very high, and my triglycerides are very low. What that's called is the lean mass hyperresponder triad. Basically, a lean mass hyperresponder is a person who, when on a ketogenic diet, they see their LDL cholesterol and total cholesterol numbers skyrocket, but they also see very high levels of HDL cholesterol and very low levels of triglycerides. So the cutoffs for this are you have to have a LDL cholesterol over 200, HDL over 80, and triglycerides under 80. And this is the very first cholesterol test that I've taken in the 18 months I've been doing carnivore where I solidly fit that lean mass hyperresponder triad. As I've been losing weight on carnivore, I have been seeing myself become more and more a lean mass hyperresponder. Now, this is not my research. This is the research of Dave Feldman. He's the one that coined this phrase, and Nick Norwitz and many others. So I'm going to link their channels in the description below. If this is something that's interesting to you, they have so much high quality content around this topic. They're also conducting an amazing research study as we speak that is testing this phenomenon. If somebody's on a ketogenic diet for an extended period of time and they have very high LDL cholesterol numbers, will their health suffer? Even if all their other markers are good? Because we honestly don't know the answer to that question. And that's something that's very important to people that are on a ketogenic diet, or, for me, I'm on a basically no carb diet. I want to know, am I going to kill myself on this diet? I don't believe so, but we need the hard data and they're working on that. So I'll link their channels in the description. So that was a really interesting thing from this test this time around. Another interesting thing that I saw in my data was that my small LDL particles are below 90. They're not even measuring below the number 90. That's the lowest I've ever seen them. And as I've continued on carnivore, my small dense LDL particles have continued to decline. The LDL particle size is exactly the same as it was in January. I got this done in January of this year. So they are large, they are buoyant, they are fluffy. They're exactly the way an LDL particle should be. And then the other thing that I'm concerned about is making sure I have that A pattern. An A pattern just means that your cholesterol particles are large and buoyant. They are happy, healthy, doing what they're supposed to be doing. If you have a B pattern, that is indicative of a metabolic health issue. I'm happy with the results of my cholesterol test. Everything is looking good. Everything is working the way it's supposed to. But let's, for example, talk about what if I had had a bad result come back? What would that look like? I get this all the time, like I have bad cholesterol or my cholesterol numbers are bad. Well, what do you mean by that? There's a lot of different numbers we're looking at here. So when I'm thinking of your cholesterol is bad, I'm thinking your triglycerides are high, so over 150. Your HDL is low, so under 40. And then if you did this NMR lipoprofile, I would expect a bad test result to have a B pattern, an abundance of the small, dense LDL particles, and your LDL particle size would be much smaller. It wouldn't be large and buoyant. They would be more dense. If that was your profile, if you fit that, all that's going to tell me is that there's something negative going on with your metabolic health. Something is damaging your LDL particles. something is damaging your lipoproteins. Typically, what's causing damage to lipoproteins in general is oxidation. So that could be from smoking, heavy drinking, chronic overexposure to ultra-processed foods, and all ultra-processed foods have vegetable seed oils in them. Those are highly oxidative. If you live or work in a polluted environment, that can be very oxidative to your particles. In addition to that, another pathway to damage your particles is through glycation. Glycation is too much blood sugar, too much glucose in your bloodstream. So insulin resistance, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, type 1 diabetes, things like that, that can cause glycation. That can damage your particles through that process. So if I was to see high triglycerides, low HDL, large number of small dense LDL particles, a small LDL size in general, and a B pattern, the next thing that I would want to look at would be your blood sugar related markers, because I could almost guarantee that you have some insulin resistance if that's what's happening in your cholesterol numbers. Now, looking at that, I'm not going to be like, oh, you're instantly going to have a heart attack, blah. The fact of the matter is cholesterol itself is not causal in heart disease. It's not causing the damage to the arteries in the first place that needs to be, covered over with plaquing so that you're not bleeding to death, right? There's a couple of interesting books on this topic. I really can't get into the nitty-gritty here because we just don't have time. I'm trying to get through this blood work, but I have some resources for you. First off, I have 3 books for you to read. The first is called The Clot Thickens by Dr. Malcolm Kendrick. Amazing book. You definitely need to read that one. The next 2 are also listed in the description. They are a collection of articles written by other doctors. They're basically alternative theories to the heart disease epidemic, what's actually causing heart disease. Excellent, excellent reads. I've also got a link to a free month of Audible in the description, so you can just listen to these books if you want to. All that's linked. Make sure to check out Dave and Nick's YouTube channels. I'll link those. And then if you want a little bit more of an in-depth discussion about LDL cholesterol and just cholesterol's function in your body, head over to my 6-month blood work video. The first 15 minutes of that is like an in-depth, very meaty explanation of all of that stuff. My 1-year blood work video has a great in-depth discussion on lean mass hyperresponder stuff. But just in general, if I'm seeing a bad cholesterol test of the stuff that we had talked about, the next thing I'd want to look at is your blood sugar numbers, because I could almost guarantee you that you're insulin resistant. So let's move into my personal blood sugar numbers next. And what I had tested was a fasting glucose. That's part of a comprehensive metabolic panel. I had a fasting insulin. I had an A1C, and I've also been tracking my blood glucose with a continuous glucose monitor. So we'll take a quick look at my numbers for the month of May. There are some other markers on this comprehensive metabolic panel, so we'll get back to those in a minute, but we'll just do the blood sugar one first. My fasting glucose was 80, my fasting insulin was 4, and my A1C was a 5.3. So the ranges that I'm looking for, that I'm aiming for in these tests, I want my fasting glucose to be under 100, I want my fasting insulin to be between 2 and 6, and I want my A1C to be under 5.7. So all of my numbers, blood sugar related numbers, are looking excellent. Let's quickly go over my continuous glucose monitor data. I am using the NutriSense app paired with a Freestyle Libre continuous glucose monitor. I've been using NutriSense for the past 18 months. I've tested all of the other, non-diabetic continuous glucose monitor apps out there, and I think NutriSense gives you the most data, and you all know that I'm a data junkie, so that's why I stick with them. I do have a link in the description if you would like to check out NutriSense. I think you get a $50 discount with my code. Anyways, let's go into my data. All right, so my average glucose for the month of May was 85. Variability was 11. My sleep average, 83. My morning average was 91. My time in range, that just means that the time that I am in the glucose range of 60 to 140. That's how I have mine set up, because mine does tend to dip a little bit lower at night. I was in range 100% of the time, and my maximum for this period of time was 158. So the reason I had that max was because at the Hack Your Health conference, the very first night we were out there, we went out to dinner and I had a margarita, and I had it before I had any protein or anything like that. So when you you have a high sugar, high carb meal or a drink or something before you've consumed protein, you're going to see your blood sugar spike, and it went up to 158, but it immediately went back down. So that's totally fine. That's a totally expected reaction, but that's where that's from. That was not from Carnivore. That was from a very sugary margarita. And for me on Carnivore, I'm typically doing a cheat meal every 4 to 6 weeks. That was my one cheat meal. I hadn't had a cheat meal for about probably 5 weeks at that point. Let's return to that comprehensive metabolic panel that the fasting glucose was a part of, because this is an $8.75 test that tells you a lot of different things. It can tell you kidney and liver function. It gives you some electrolyte numbers. So let's go into these numbers right now. I'll pop this up on the screen. My BUN was 11, my creatinine 0.66. My BUN to creatinine ratio was 17. That's excellent. Your eGFR, this is a kidney function number. You just want this to be above 59, and mine was 114. So it's looking good. The next few items on this list are electrolytes, and your body regulates these pretty tightly. So my sodium 136, potassium 4.3, chloride 99, carbon dioxide 20, calcium 9.7. And then the rest of the numbers here, protein, your albumin, your globulin, your AG ratio, bilirubin, alkaline phosphatase, and your AST and ALT. These are just kidney and liver function numbers, and everything there is looking good. Now let's move into some iron numbers. So this is a retest from last month's tests. Let's get into the background as to why I'm testing this. I did a little bit more in-depth testing this time around because I wanted to see if I had a true overabundance of iron. So over the winter, I was supplementing with very high levels of D3 and K2, and I'm pretty sure that I sapped my magnesium stores dry. You have to supplement with magnesium when you're taking really high levels of vitamin D. And I didn't know that. So I experienced some fatigue in February. Now, before I figured out that it was magnesium that was the most likely culprit, I thought perhaps it was low vitamin C. And then because of a low vitamin C, that my iron might be low. So I supplemented with a multivitamin that had iron in it for a couple of weeks. And then I retested, and I noticed that my TIBC was low. That doesn't mean my iron was low. What that means is that my total iron binding capacity was low. So you need a molecule called transferrin, and that binds with, each one of the transferrins binds with an iron molecule. And if you don't have enough transferrin around, you can't bind up all the iron that's in your blood. Now, I consume a lot of meat, so my iron levels in theory should have been fine, and they were. I shouldn't have supplemented with iron. I didn't need it. So I decided to see if I had an overabundance of iron in my system. Since my TIBC was a bit low, I got a ferritin test and a transferrin test in addition to the iron and TIBC test that I got last time, just to check out how everything's doing a month later. So let's take a look at those tests right now. You can see my TIBC is 239, so still technically low, but it's up 15 points higher than it was last time, so it's beginning to recover. My UIBC, my iron, and my iron saturation are all within range, and they are looking good. Then we're going to move on to the ferritin level. So ferritin is a great inflammation marker. It can also tell you if you have too much iron in your system. But as you can see, my ferritin level is normal at 125. The final test that I got to make sure that my iron is not too high is transferrin. If the transferrin number is low, that would just mean that all of the transferrin is bound up with an iron molecule. That just means that I didn't have any extra transferrin to bind up any more iron. So if my iron had been high, if my ferritin had been high, and my transferrin low, and my TIBC low, I would know, oh crap, I think I have too much iron in my system. I would go donate some blood and do some hardcore exercise, and that would take care of that problem. But my transferrin came in at 210. So it's fine. I think I'm going to do the iron and TIBC test one more time next month for my 18-month blood work. And by then, I'm sure that my TIBC will be back into that normal range. So that's why I got all of those tests done this time around. Let's move into the other blood tests that I got done this time around. The first off is vitamin D. Everybody should be getting a vitamin D test at least once a year. Most people are deficient or like horribly deficient, single digits. You want this to be at least above 30. I've heard different doctors talking about between 40 and 60 is an optimal range. Some people say 60 to 80. I just aim to have it, 40 or higher. That's my goal. This time around, it was 50.6. That's actually down a few points from when I got this done in December, but that's okay. I'm no longer supplementing with vitamin D. I'm trying to get all my vitamin D now from the sun directly. So I wanted to get this test done at the beginning of summer. I'm going to get it done at the end of summer, and I can see just how effective the sun is in raising that vitamin D level. The next test I got was a homocysteine level. So this is an inflammation marker. You want this to be under 15, and mine was 5.1, down from 7.3 in January. 7.3 is just fine number, 5.1 even better. So my inflammation is nice and low according to that marker. If your homocysteine level is above 15, you really want to work on getting that down as quickly as possible. One of the most effective ways to do that is doing a low carb diet. Make sure you're eating whole, real foods. Carnivore can be really effective for that, but you really need to lower your blood glucose levels. That can be a common reason your homocysteine levels are elevated. Also, extreme stress. So you want to work on those stress levels, make sure you're dialing in your sleep, things like that. But yeah, under 15 is the goal for homocysteine. Next up, I tested uric acid. I test this a couple times a year and it came back as a 4.3. Perfect. It's perfect. It's in the range that it's supposed to be, and everything is good there. Okay, so the final test that I got done that I've never done before, but I think that you might want to get done for yourself, is a leptin test. Leptin was discovered in 1994, and it's a protein that acts like a hormone. Leptin promotes satiety, and it plays a huge part in energy balance and weight management. I'll put a link to a journal article that reviews leptin and its functions in the description below, if you're curious to learn more. I like to think of leptin as being kind of similar to insulin. If your fasting insulin is elevated, that can be a great indicator of insulin resistance, which just means that your body is having to work harder to do the same job that it was doing before, which is clearing that excess glucose out of your bloodstream. I like to think of it like a drug addict doing whatever drug they choose, and over time they have to keep doing more and more of it because they're developing a tolerance to that drug. Similar thing can happen with insulin. Basically, if your glucose levels are elevated for an extended period of time, your body is going to need more and more insulin to process it. And then once you get into type 2 diabetes, the whole system is broken. So let's move on to leptin now. If your fasting leptin is elevated, that can be an indicator of leptin resistance. Leptin resistance can lead to overeating and hunger. Elevated fasting leptin can also be a reason that you're having trouble losing weight. Typically, for both fasting insulin and fasting leptin levels, if you want to get those down, going on an ultra low carb diet is a very effective solution. Getting those blood glucose levels under control can be really helpful, and you can see those numbers decline over time. I first learned about leptin watching Dr. Anthony Chaffee. I will link the video where he talks about it in the description below. After watching that video, I was curious if I could order a fasting leptin test on ownyourlabs.com, and you can. This is a pricier test. It came in at $52.50, but I had never done it, so I figured, why not? My leptin came in at 6.9. And what the heck does that mean? So there's this handy dandy table that they give you. It's based on your gender, so male or female, and also your BMI. My BMI is 25, so you can see that my range is 5.1 to 28. You can see at 6.9, I'm on the lower end of that range, so my fasting leptin is awesome. Now, if you get this test done for yourself and you look at the range and you're on the higher end of the range, perhaps it is time to lower those carbs a bit if you're not already carnivore or keto or low carb, and try to, get that under control. I would also, want you to get the fasting insulin done because these kind of go hand in hand. And from watching his video, I learned that at a certain point, your fasting insulin is going to go down to a certain point. Your fasting leptin is going to go down to a certain point, and then once you hit those, it's like a signal for your body to be like, oh, okay, I don't have to be in storage mode anymore. I don't have to, hold on to this excess fat, and you're going to start losing weight again in theory. So I think it'd be really interesting to, get this leptin test done and get the fasting insulin and see how that's going. And then test again in about 3 months after doing, a low carb intervention, and see how those numbers are declining. It does take some time, but you will see over time that those numbers are going down. And And then, you know, at some point the weight's going to start coming off. So if you've hit like a weight loss stall, I think that this is an excellent marker to test. And yeah, it's a little bit expensive, but you're only going to be testing it, you know, probably the one time. And then if you're going to be trying to get it down, if it's elevated, then I would test probably every 3 months. But I think this one was a really interesting test, and I'm glad that I was able to order it on Own Your Labs. Everything I talked about in this video is going to be linked in the description. There's the coupon code for Own Your Labs. I have the code for NutriSense if you want to track your glucose through a continuous glucose monitor. I think everybody should do it for at least 2 weeks. It's been very, very interesting. I have just a wealth of data from the 18 months that I've been tracking it. I've also listed out each of the tests that I got done and their pricing so that you can find it on Own Your Labs. If you have any questions whatsoever, please leave it in the description below. And guys, I just want you to know, I'm not a doctor. I just like to read and I do a lot of research. I have gotten all of these reference ranges and all of this stuff from reading books, listening to doctors in the low carb space, journal articles and things like that. So, you know, you can empower yourself. You can learn how to read these labs. It's not super complicated. It just takes some practice and some time, and you can do it too. I encourage you to take responsibility for your health. If you live in a state where you can order your own blood work, do it. You shouldn't have to fight your doctor to get a fasting insulin. It's literally a $12.60 test, okay? This is important. You're the only person that's going to take care of your health. So with all of that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.